Bueno, bienvenidos, 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 bienvenidos. Me encanta tenerlos por aquí en nuestro día de hoy de nuestras videoconferencias de liderazgo. Hoy vamos a tener a Bob con un tema muy especial, no solamente porque es hoy en día un tema, voy a decir, como candente en el liderazgo y en las organizaciones, sino porque adicionalmente como ustedes saben, es toda una, voy a decir, celebridad en el tema, un especialista en el tema de la innovación. Para aquellos que no lo sepan, Bob tiene un libro que se llama The Innovator's Way, las formas o la forma del innovador. Así que hoy nos vamos a dar un gusto, un paseo delicioso a través de escuchar hablar de innovación versus todo el tema de la novedad. O sea, ¿cuál es esta diferencia entre crear y construir algo nuevo y realmente generar un espacio de innovación? Para mí es un gusto poder dejarlos con él. No me voy a demorar mucho para que tengamos mucho más tiempo con él. Así que los dejo con Bob Dunham, que es nuestro fundador, nuestra fuente y nuestro creador del liderazgo generativo. Así que Bob, todos tuyos.
Fantastic, thank you. Everybody give me a high 10. Let's connect here. The high 10 is not only a friendly wave, it's a way to feel like we're in the conversation together. And for those of you who have your cameras off, if you can turn them on, please do. I'd like us to feel like we're in a conversation, not simply looking at a screen together. So this is a conversation that my intent, my hope for you is at the end of this conversation, you will walk out seeing the world with new eyes, that you will see possibilities in new places, that you will see action that you didn't see before, that you will have available the capacity to produce results that were not available at the beginning of our conversation. Why do I have this intent? Because in our work in generative leadership, we have found that conversations are the core of our life. The future lives in our conversations. Our possibilities live in our conversations. Our actions are provoked, initiated, and guided in our conversations. Our results are evaluated in conversations. Our emotions all are speaking a conversation. Are we getting the point? Conversations are important. And this is an important new perspective in our world because the common sense of our culture is that conversations simply describe things. But what we have learned in my over 40 years of working in this discipline and tradition is conversations are where everything gets generated. And so if you want to access your success, if you want to access your failure, you just have to look at your conversations. And conversations here are meant in a widest possible meaning, not simply words, but the interpretations with which we see the world, the interpretations that guide us to take action, the automatic interpretations that drive our habits. And so, since we're going to talk about innovation, I'm speaking about this perspective is already an innovation. And later we'll explain why I can say that. So my invitation here, as we go through our journey together, looking together with new eyes, seeing new possibilities and new actions, is that the way you listen is not simply to understand concepts. One of our learnings about learning in our journey in generative leadership for over 4 decades is that one of the barriers to action and results in the world, one of the barriers to innovation itself, is the assumption that we're learning when we understand concepts. But understanding concepts is not enough. You can't understand your way to playing the piano. You can't play tennis because you understand it. And you can't do leadership because you understand a leadership model. You have to move in the world and in a world with other people. This is where innovation happens. How are we doing? Is this making sense so far? Okay.
Can I tell you something, Bob? Sorry.
Oh, of course.
Para todos aquellos que sea la primera vez que están con nosotros, hay traducción simultánea para la videoconferencia. Entonces, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla de Zoom van a encontrar un botón que se llama interpretación. Allí pueden escuchar en inglés o pueden elegir a español y Beita va a estar traduciéndonos el día de hoy. Bea está un poquito disfónica, entonces si ella necesita cortar el sonido para poder tomar tecito con miel o poder toser, ella nos va a avisar. Bueno, entonces ya, quería avisarles eso porque sé que hay personas que no sabían que abajo había traducción. Bob, please.
Very good. So B, if you're listening in Spanish, B is my voice in Spanish. The team decided I needed more of the feminine energy. So this is the way we are compensating for, for that. But everybody take a deep breath. Really do it. Don't just think about it. I want you to feel your body when you take the breath. And notice that when you breathe deeply, not shallow, not with tension, slowly, deeply, and relax on the exhale, that you expand. Your awareness expands. You enter a state of more openness. And so every now and then in our conversation, I will invite you to take a deep breath as part of really paying attention to life as a full body sport. It's not just traveling in our mind and in our head. We need to be in our full body experience. And the purpose of the breath is to enter the space of presence and openness. What I'm asking you to interrupt with the breath is being in your head, being lost. Can we agree? Let's take a deep breath. Let's be open to new possibilities. Not just the concept of new possibilities, but real new possibilities in your life. And so, why are we having this conversation? What's the point? I could talk for days about innovation. As Mary Bell mentioned, I'm the co-author of a book called The Innovator's Way. Dr. Peter Denning and I wrote the book. We spent 7 years doing the research and writing, and we published the book in 2010. And why innovation? What's the point? It sounds like something cool, you know, a popular topic for businesses. There's a lovely phrase from a management book where they were talking about innovation. And they said, on the road to the future, you can be a driver a passenger, or roadkill. And the way that you become a driver is to become an innovator that other people follow. That's true not only for companies, that is true for leaders, that is true for teams, and that is true in our own lives. One of the characteristics of our human lives is that human beings are always living in the state of I'm here and I'm going there. This perspective of a journey is very revealing for us. Because since we're here and going there, we would like to go somewhere good. We would like to avoid going somewhere bad. And then we have a lot of stories. A lot of stories about here, a lot of stories about there, a lot of stories about here to there. And sometimes our stories are not clear. Sometimes we don't know where we are or where we're going or how to get there. And that produces a certain experience of life, not only in our individual lives, but that would be a life of meaninglessness, a life of boredom, even despair, or a life of resignation. This is true not only for individuals, this is true for groups, communities. Look at what's happening in the world today. Huge changes are happening. Huge breakdowns are happening. We had COVID. The whole global system has been shaken and is attempting to recover from the impact of COVID. That impacted your life. That impacted what threat did the world present to you? How did you have to change your habits? How did you cope with that? How did you recover your mood? I found a lot of people in anxiety, in fear, in resignation in the earlier days of COVID. There's been more recovery since then. What is needed in those moments of crisis? Innovation. Learning when the world changes is not simply trying to take control and return to the old world. It's adapting to the new world. Not as simply a problem of survival, but of sustaining something important. There's two aspects that are biological, but also existential for life as we face a changing world. We need to do two things. The first thing is we need to conserve what is needed to live. And I propose to you as leaders and coaches to leaders, we need to conserve what is valuable, what is meaningful. The world's going to change. If we cannot adapt, which is the second necessity, if we cannot adapt, we become a dinosaur trying to survive with the last few plants on the planet. We also have, in our journey from here to there, the experience of ambition, that I would like to accomplish something. I would like to grow to become something. I would like to contribute in the world. I would like to have an impact. I would like to solve some of the problems that people suffer with. And this is another source of motivation in our journey from here to there. But the question of innovation is saying, is the here to there journey only going to be constructed out of the building blocks we already have? Or is it possible that there's something new? Is it possible that there's something better? Both in the vision of the destination itself, as well as the steps of the journey. Leaders, what constitutes a human being as a leader is that you interact with people in a way that a new future is envisioned and that actions are taken to make that future real. Innovation is similar. Many of the skills of leadership are required for innovation, and the effective leader is almost always innovating. So I'll unpack how this relationship shows up. But my question for you for tonight is, why are you here? What called you to this conversation? What is the concern you have that says this conversation is relevant for me? I want to be there. What is the ambition or breakdown in your life? You're saying, I hope this will help me. Because I want our conversation to be about that, not just the theory of innovation, but about what's possible with innovation in my life. If I knew how to innovate, if I was better at innovation, what would I do with it? Because I am going to show you the actions, the practices, and skills of innovation. And the question I want to leave you with at the end of the session is, what are you going to do with it as a leader, as a coach, or someone designing your own life? This is the core of the spirit of our commitment in generative leadership and the Institute, is to enable people to discover the capacities that are already in you to create. That's what we call being generative is. And so innovation is one of these areas that we have explored to enable ourselves to generate. Generate what? More value, more satisfaction, more meaning, more health, more safety. And in fact, our vision statement and our commitment in generative leadership, and that we call all generative leaders to, is to commit to create a world in which everyone thrives. Because as human beings, we are creating the world. And we're creating some parts of the world that are pretty horrible. But if that's the power we have to create, let's learn how to create something better. So are you ready to explore here? Fantastic. Fantastic. Take a deep breath. Let me share with you some of the lessons about innovation that Dr. Denning and I learned in our work on the Innovator's Way. So I do have, I love it when computers work. They don't always do that. So innovation. And so this is a copy of the cover of the book. I've had people buy the book and tell me they haven't read it. So it's a big book. It can be a doorstop if you don't read it. But if you read it, I think it will open a doorway to the future in a new way. Unfortunately, the book is only available in English. I've actually approached the publisher to translate into Spanish, and I hope that that can happen at some moment. So what is it that innovation what is the common sense about innovation, and why is it such an issue? Why is it such a challenge? When we were writing the book, we did research, and we found that at that time, only 4% of innovation projects being tracked in industry were successful. That's pretty horrible. A 96% failure rate. How do we deal with that? Is it because innovation is so rare? The interpretation that we brought is that that statistic is a symptom of a blind spot. I don't think you would go to a dentist who has a 96% failure rate at working on your teeth. I don't think you would hire a consultant who has a 96% failure rate. So what is it that we don't know about innovation that led to that? When we looked at another place of innovation that we regard as innovation, it's patents, patent filings. And we found the statistic was that only 0.2% of patents were ever commercialized. A 99.8% failure rate. And we also found when we looked in the field of research, which we also expect to see innovation, that less than 25% of research projects were ever influential in producing a pragmatic outcome in the world. So you see, we have a blind spot. And one of the first confusions that we learned about innovation was that people would often make a mistake of confusing invention with innovation, which helped us to understand the high failure rate. When you think that an innovation is something new, we call that an invention. So take a moment here. Have you ever invented something? Something new that you think is really good? That is not an innovation yet in the framework of understanding. Because to invent something new does not mean that anybody uses it. A lot of products have been invented that were new, that did not sell. So innovation is the step after invention that gets people to use what's new. And even if you are not an inventor yourself, there may be an invention, something new you see in the world that you think is important, that you think is really good, really cool, and you see that people are not using it. It's not becoming widely adopted. That's because what's failing is the innovation process. So that's where we're going to look. So what is innovation? Here's the statement. You can write it down. We articulate invention is coming up with something new, but innovation is the adoption of new practices in a community. Let me say that again. What is innovation? Our generative interpretation, which means it's something you can see and do that generates the result, is that in order to have an innovation, you have to have the adoption of new practices in a community. The very minimum is people have to buy the new product. But if you have something new, it always requires some kind of new behavior that goes with it, even if it's only the adoption. So let's look. I'm going to share a diagram with you that is how we summarize what we learned about innovation. And we found that there were three categories of actions and skills of the innovator. One category is producing an invention, coming up with something new. A second category is what moves the invention to an innovation. That's a separate set of steps. It's where the adoption happens inside a company, inside a team, inside a marketplace, inside a community, inside a nation, inside a discipline. And we also found that there are some fundamental underlying skills of perspectives and actions and conversations, because the innovation process happens in conversation that underlie all the prior phases. They have to be skills that you develop to be a successful innovator as an individual or as a team. So if you're a leader, you want to develop these perspectives, these skills, and you want to develop them in your team. If you're a coach or consultant, you need to be able to bring them to your client, not just to show them, but to help them engage in new behaviors, in new perspectives. And this kind of learning that results in new behaviors is one of the challenges of innovation, because people have to learn. They need to change habits. And almost always when you change an old habit, when you bring a new habit, you have to interrupt an old one. And that's part of the barrier of learning and of innovation. So we have 8 practices of the innovator. And the first one is the practice called sensing. Sensing is a skill. Sensing is looking around in your world and saying, you know what? There's something missing. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm looking for it. There's something that could be different here, something that could be better here. In the words of one of my teachers, Dr. Fernando Flores, he called this being sensitive to a disharmony, that you just feel something's off, even when it's not clear what it is yet. What is the skill of the innovator? The skill of the innovator is they hang on to this sense. They don't dismiss it. What do people normally do? They say, well, I have a question and I don't have an answer, so I'm going to ignore it. Or I'm too busy, I'm not going to worry about it. But the innovator says, nah, there's something off here. Oh, there's something, but I don't have it clear yet, but I can sense what it is. And they stay with the question. They explore the question. They talk with people. When you read in our book, we have many examples of innovators and how they went through this process of figuring out what's missing and what could be invented. The internet is one such example. The internet was invented because one man, Tim Berners-Lee, had a sense that there was a possibility for a new kind of language to make a new kind of interface in computers. No, they didn't exist then. No one else was thinking about this or talking about it. Everybody was just using computers the way they were as the tool that they already were. He was reaching out into possibilities, and he began to invent something new. So my question for you, what is your habit as you move through your world, with the world where there is satisfaction and dissatisfaction, where there is solid standard practice and there's dissatisfaction? Do you hang on to what's missing? Do you explore what's possible, or do you Are you a good performer that gets busy and your time and your mind are too full to keep that perspective alive? This is a practice. This is a recurring conversation. In my own case, the question that I have learned to live with for decades and will never be closed, because it's a breakdown I see in the world of leadership, in the world of coaching, in the world of human life, is how do people learn? Not just learn conceptually, but learn in a way they see their world with new eyes, act with new capability, and create new value in how they do it. That's my question. And it's a question I'm looking at my world with all the time, even tonight. Second practice is to envision. When you go from the sensibility that there's something that's missing, you begin to have the conversation of, if there's an innovation possible here, what would it look like? What would be possible that's outside the common sense, that's outside what I already understand that I could do? I remember a couple of innovations in my life history that were surprising to me, that are now part of the obviousness of our current world. One was, when I was a boy, I used to watch my father shave in the morning. It was quite a ritual. He would make hot water, he would use a towel, he would put it on his face to make the whiskers stand up. He had a safety razor, and the safety razors were very sharp. You had to be very careful because it was very easy to cut yourself and bleed. And later on, when I was a young man, we began to have these new razors. It's like something that was so common, so everyday. I would have never thought that it could be improved. And yet, Gillette invested and led the charge of new razors that could do a close shave without cutting you. And that was like amazing to me, that something I thought was permanent was changed. I remember early in my consulting, in my professional life, I used to travel quite a bit for business, and I'd have to rent a car, and you'd have to get off your plane, go catch the bus, go to the rental car counter, and then you would have to present your card and your identification and wait in line to get your car keys. And then when you brought the car back, you had to bring the paperwork back. And then all of a sudden, this was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, all of a sudden, they set it up through the internet that all your information was handled, your charge was handled, and you could go and walk to the car lot, and the car would be waiting for you. And when you returned the car, you didn't have to go back to turn in any paperwork. That was amazing. I would have never thought of that. But it was obvious if you were looking at it from a particular point of view, the innovator's point of view. It's like obvious to us now. We would use that solution every place we found waiting in line. But it was new then. Somebody had to break the assumption that that's the way things were. And so when you visualize your new, so my question for you, if you've been exploring your invention and visualizing it, this is also where the inventors would build prototypes and begin to show that this new possibility could happen. Have you done that? Have you envisioned what it would look like if you had a new product, a new practice, a new organization, a new team, a new company. And what I find is most people say, I don't have time for that. That's just going to waste my time. Of course, it'll waste time if you're not competent in innovation. So those are the invention steps: to sense, envisage, and begin to demonstrate that this new possibility exists, including that it's not clear and it will have to evolve. This is the path of innovations. What happens, though, after this visualization, the next conversation of the innovator is to be able to make an offer. Who are you creating the invention for? Who is going to use it? Who is going to buy it? Who is going to learn it? And why would they take the trouble? What is the value for them? Why would they undertake to look at something new? There has to be an offer. There has to be some way that the innovator has made their invention known and said, here it is. Here's the value it can produce for you. And since we're seeing these practices are all conversational, in the book, we go to great lengths to show, here are all the breakdowns that happen in that conversation. Here's all the skills that you have to make this conversation work. And not only that, here is all the resistance that you will encounter in this step. When you make offers, you'll get a lot of no. And when you make offers, you will have competition. Are you ready for that? And so it's not how good the product or the service or the new practice is. It's about how is it presented as an offer that people can understand and see the value. Now, we're not inventing anymore. We're in the innovation practices. We're putting our attention on getting people to adopt a new behavior, to adopt our innovation. 4, the next step of innovation is you want adoption. What is adoption? Adoption is that people say, I'm going to do this new practice. And there's 3 commitments that have to be made in the adoption process. The first commitment that you need to produce in people that you want to adopt your innovation is that they'll even be available for your conversation. So if you're out in the world and you're trying to make your offer, will they even meet with you? How do you have that conversation? Then the next step is, here's something new. Why don't you try it out? Here's a demonstration. Here's a prototype. Here's a demo project. Here's something we could do to demonstrate. How do you get them to say, yes, I will try it out? And this is where they see the true value in their life. This is where it has to work in their experience. And this is true not only with products and services, but with practices. If we're going to bring a new interpretation of leadership, such as generative leadership, which includes new practices for teamwork, for planning, for managing projects, we need to offer it, show the value, and they need to try it out. They need to see that it's going to work. Then we have the practice of adoption, which is enabling the innovation to be sustained. It's not enough to try something new and like it, particularly in organizations, but also in people's lives. This new practice, this new behavior needs to fit in the rest of their life. It needs to fit in the rest of their processes. It needs to fit in their culture. And this is sometimes takes time and is not trivial. And they need help. There's something new. How do they fit it in? When we look at learning, when we look at leadership and coaching as a process of innovation, it's not enough to have something new that produces value that they try out. How do we enable them to sustain it? To become part of new habits and not be discarded because it doesn't fit with the old habits. In organizations, a new innovation of thinking or strategy or commitment to a product offer can cause a reorganization of the processes and the roles in the company. And this will often produce a backlash of resistance because people who are competent in the old process are going to lose power. And so here we see when the change is major, it's not just a new product or a new app on my phone, that there's a whole dimension that opens up of power and politics and who's going to adopt what and who has the power to make things happen. And sometimes you see in our consulting practices really fabulously positive changes that can be made, but the people in charge will decline. It's too uncomfortable, it's too challenging, it's going to change their world. And so these are the many dimensions of the innovation conversation for adoption. What we found in all 5 of these practices is that there are 3 categories of skills in conversation, of connecting with people, of listening to them, of having them see how their concerns can be addressed, how to work together with your own team and with a client team, and the challenges of making those conversations work has 3 categories of skills that apply in all of these other 5 sets of conversations. One is the skill set of execution, of being able to execute, to make and keep promises that produce trust and satisfy customers as a professional, to have a team that can have its energy go into the success of their project rather than the internal frictions that often arise in teamwork. So there needs to be a way to execute your prototype project, to execute with the client. This is often the key between success and failure. If you bring an innovation into an organization, but you can't execute the project of engaging the staff effectively. Then we have leadership itself. And by leadership, the generative leadership discipline has unpacked leadership as a set of conversations. And here, conversations are not meant as words and talking. It's conversations that generate commitments to action that cause new actions and new behaviors to happen. And this is where you have to produce trust, you have to produce alignment, you have to produce teamwork, you have to produce ownership. And when we're talking about something new that's going to change the future, particularly in the early phases when it's not quite clear yet, it takes a lot of leadership to maintain the relevance of what are we doing, why are we doing it, and sustaining our commitment to it. And then we have the practices of embodiment, the practices of having the actual skills in conversation to have presence, to have connection, to manage the moods and emotions that are provoked. And so often in human interaction, what is a breakdown and interferes with the process is people are triggered to fear, anger, resignation, anxiety, overwhelm, and they drive certain behaviors that are not behaviors of alignment and collaboration and teamwork. And so we can't ignore the very presence that we come forward with. And so you see that the adoption process, incorporating invention to the adoption of the new behaviors and practices, requiring skills of teamwork, leadership, execution, and person-to-person interaction. We've created a big space here. And in the book, we have a lot of examples of successful innovation projects and failures and what got in the way. But my question for you is, what is your offer in the world? Are people accepting it? When you bring new possibilities in your work as a leader, or as a coach, or as a consultant, and people accept your offers, do they adopt new skills? Do they learn beyond concepts to perform new behaviors that produce new value? Have you been able to create relationships in which the journey of learning is sustained over time, and that you can refer back to prior projects and prior successes for the new people that you invite to your offer? Have you been able to do your innovations with execution that overcomes breakdowns? Have you been a leader that moves the process forward when there's resistance? And have you been able to sustain your embodiment to produce trust and presence and connection, even through the challenges, and do so in a way that you are fed by the process rather than exhausted and drained? And so this is a way to think about change in the world. You want to change the world, you need to change people. What is the change that you have to make in a leader or a team or an organization or a community or a profession or in politics? You need people to make new commitments, to adopt new practices for the sake of new results. That is innovation. And you can't have innovation without leadership. And leadership is almost always about innovation. So everybody take a deep breath. And let me ask you to write in the chat, what's been provoked for you in this perspective about innovation? What I want you to notice is we're talking about steps that are not simply conceptual. They are actions. They are conversations. They produce results in the changed behavior of people. And where is that already happening in your life and work? Or where do you see that you would like to be more effective? Out of these 8 practices, which ones strike you as a relevant place for your attention to help you improve what impact you can have in your world, with your clients, in your work, and in your life? And with that, I'm going to ask you to just share a comment in the chat about what are you seeing for yourself from this perspective on innovation. And if you have any questions, I'd like to open up for Q&A. And if you want to raise your hand or use the hand thing, we can have a chat, or if you want to type in your question in the chat. I'd love to hear what has been the impact of looking from this point of view. What question do you have about next steps for yourself? Remember, I invited you to two things. One, to have this be about you and what's possible in your leadership, coaching, or consulting. And second, that I'd like you to leave this conversation with identifying a new action, a new behavior, a new place of focus that will empower you to produce more of the results you want in your life and work. So let's have everyone type in. Spanish is welcome. I have my friends here. Okay. Adaptive changes. Yes. Hector, the embodiment process is huge, and it's one of the blind spots of our culture. What we have found in generative leadership and innovation is people wind up finding themselves blocked or thinking things are not possible because they have a blind spot. When they don't know how something can be done, then it can't be done for them. And so how do people learn? What we have learned is that learning is biological. If you understand concepts and that's all you learn, the biology that changes is you have ideas and you can talk. But the kind of learning we're interested in, generative learning, is that I can take new behavior that produces new results. And that means I need to learn to have a body that can go into the unknown. If I'm going to learn leadership, I have to have a body that can be present in the face of challenges, that can be calm in the middle of the firestorm. These are skills. They're not just personality characteristics of a few people. These can be learned. And there's a whole discipline that we pursue there. Very good. Matsuo, yeah, innovation is adoption by others. Otherwise, you're having a good time all alone, entertainment. So Maribel, can you help me with what the questions are that you think we should be chatting with?
Tenemos a Clara, que nos está contando acerca de que la innovación siempre ha sido algo inquietante y que implica un ajuste, un cambio, una modificación en las formas de hacer. Y esto aplica para todos los campos de las dimensiones de su vida, tanto en lo personal como en lo laboral. Jordanka te dice que has generado inspiración y sentido, que la invitas a crear y a diseñar sus servicios desde lo que ella considera que es su propósito en el mundo. Y ver más allá las ofertas actuales de coaching. Que la invitas a ser más clara para que pueda generar valor a su cliente. También Clara dice que es un aprendizaje colectivo y que es un ajuste de lo colectivo. Y bueno, y Ángela te habla acerca del centro.
Let me interrupt,
Go
Maribel. Let me speak to the last comment about creating value from your, results in the world from your purpose. One of the innovations, one of the new perspectives that we have discovered in our 4 decades, more than 4 decades in the generative leadership journey, has been this question of what makes a human being a human being? What makes life alive? what makes value. These are all related, because innovation is not simply a technical process of coming up with a new product or a new feature of a product. Innovation is an act of creation, but what do we want to do when we create? Do we sacrifice ourselves to make a product and hope we get wealthy? That's one game. But what empowers us to do our best work, to define our journey from here to there as a there that's meaningful and worth doing, includes this aspect that people will describe as purpose. But in our generative tradition, we have been exploring and come up with an interpretation that what makes us most human, most alive as a human, and that is fundamental to the value of our actions and the meaning of our actions, is the internal state of care. What do we care about? And unfortunately, in our culture, people have been trained that what you care about is personal and selfish. That when you go out into the world, you need to please other people. You need to not be focused on yourself. And it leads to a path of sacrifice and exhaustion. Trying to be a production machine to please others. But when we go back to what do we care about, you see, value, satisfaction, and meaning come from your care. They are not characteristics in the external world of a product or service. Value, satisfaction, and meaning in the client is inside them, not in the product. And so we need to learn how to go into ourselves and into the inner life of our clients to understand what is valuable for them in the external world. So care is fundamentally the foundation of our life. When we're connected to our care, when we're taking care of what we care about, that action and its results are valuable. Taking care of what we care about is what produces satisfaction. It's the foundation of meaning, but it's also the foundation of business. If you offer something to a client and it doesn't take care of what they care about, they're not going to buy it because it's not valuable to them. And the value is in them, not in the product. So I use the example of how valuable is a $25 million yacht. And if you ask me, a $25 million yacht is not valuable at all. If I had $25 million, I wouldn't spend it on a yacht. Because the value is an assessment in me based on what I care about. And yet there are people with $25 million who care about a yacht. And so that transaction exists in the world. But because people have externalized value as somehow determined by the marketplace and disconnected from our internal experience of our care, our work and our offers often are a path of sacrifice, and we don't do our best work, and it doesn't feed us. But when we're connected to our care, that's when we're most alive. And when we make offers that we care about, I guarantee you, there are other people who care about it. I care about organizations, teams, businesses, and leaders making a positive difference in the world and creating a better world. And there's plenty of breakdowns where that's not happening. So I think I'm going to be busy for a long time. But that's valuable to other people too. But I see it as an issue of the blindness people have to their power to create, because if they were connected with it, they would be producing better companies and better teams and better leadership that was more valuable to them and to others. So I wanted to unpack that leadership and innovation is not a technical process, a technical solution with a procedure with some steps. And you put the coin in the slot and you get an innovation out. It's changing something in the lives of people. It has to touch their heart. It has to speak to their future. It has to resonate with their possibilities, even if it's just a new app on the iPhone. I have a lot of apps on my iPhone. Some of them I actually use. Most I don't. Not valuable. Okay, how are we doing? Are you seeing the new perspective? What makes this generative is I'm talking about things you can see and do that will make a difference. New conversations, new interpretations, new offers, new value. So let's go to another question. Thank you. That was a good one.
You have a lot. So
okay.
Voy a enfocarme en las preguntas. Aquí Ernesto te pregunta si existe alguna diferencia en el proceso de innovación y lo que conocemos como change management.
Change management, the reason that the industry exists is that it's a problem. And in order to compare innovation to change management, I would have to know what you mean by change management. Because if the steps of innovation are being used, then change management would be innovative. But the problem we see in change management, it's commonly reduced to the installation of new procedures. And often this is accompanied by installing new computer systems that people are now not being enhanced by the computer system. They are the slaves of a computer system. The last 2 days I've been trying to talk to my internet company, and I can't seem to get a human being on the other end. and so change management, if it's dealing with people as people, not as units of production, not as mechanisms to execute a procedure, and that the process is looking to produce clarity in what we care about in this change, what we're taking care of in the change, that we're committed to the change, that we're going to coordinate through the change, that we're going to manage the breakdowns and the pains that the change produces, that we're going to take care of people through the change, particularly those who are less relevant in their role. If those are being taken care of in change management, yes, then I would say there's similarity. But if it's more mechanical, then I would say, no, we're missing the essence. That what produces change in the organizational world is the changes in the people, and not just in their behavior as units of production, but in their care, their commitment, and their ownership. And you can tell it when you walk into company situations. You walk into a company and you can just see how people walk down the hall. You can see the mood that the bodies are walking around in and have an idea of what's missing in the culture or what's positive in the culture. Am I answering your question?
Good. Gracias, Bob. Aquí Lina te hace otra pregunta y es, ¿qué le da valor al valor?
Well, let me unpack a little more where I was poking before with care. What do you care about? This is not a concept to understand. This is something you experience. What do you care about? Now, when I ask you that, I'm not asking what you desire. I'm not asking what you like. I'm asking what matters in your life. What most deeply matters. Not just to be successful or happy or excited, but when you say, I'm living my life deeply, I'm living the life I was meant to live, I can be only grateful for my life. This is the depth of care. Now we find that what we care about is a question that is not asked in our culture. It's a blind spot. When we do our programs, we begin with this question the first day. And most people don't have a clear answer. They have answers, well, I love my family. But is that the care that is going to make you whole and complete and fulfill your life? For most people, what you love is not the same. Of course you love your family. But does that make your life meaningful? No, that takes more. And so, because care is a missing conversation, a blind spot, we take the time to explore this question. We have exercises and it takes time. We normally see that it takes 6 to 12 months for people to get oriented there if they haven't done work there before. But care is the answer to the question of what matters to you. Value is another way to ask the question. If something is valuable to you, then it matters. But if something is valuable and you don't care about it, it's not valuable. It's like my example of the yacht. Oh, this is a very valuable yacht. No, it's not valuable to me. I don't care. Then what makes value value is that there's care, and value is an assessment about an outcome. Value is an assessment about a promise. When you make a promise, you're saying, we will produce a future that has value, because if it doesn't have value, you're not going to accept the promise. You're not going to have your offer accepted, because offers are promises. And so what makes valuable valuable is that something that is cared about is taken care of. It's a promise that takes care of something, and it's meaningful to you. Otherwise, it's just commercial value. It's just trading stocks on the stock market. Doesn't really matter to you. Doesn't fulfill my life. Doesn't give me work that I find fulfilling. It's just transacting for an outcome. And so commercial value tends to be some kind of financial, but that's a side effect of the real value when you're in leadership, consulting and coaching, because it's about life. Are you producing a new future that takes care of what is cared about? And one of the breakdowns with leaders, when you first work with them in this framework of value, and you ask them, where are you going in your life? What are you going with your career? And they say, I don't know, I'm just busy. And that's a life trajectory that will wind up someday saying, what the hell am I doing? I've been busy. I poured my life into my job. I succeeded or I failed. I got rich or I didn't. So what? What's truly valuable? So there's the deep personal value, and then there's the value of leadership in the world to help people take more appropriate action that's valuable to them and others. The breakdown in teams is the common sense for many people in our culture that I'm paid to be a unit of production. I'm paid for what I produce. And so I don't even think about whether my work is valuable to me because I'm just selling my production capacity. And if you don't explore what is valuable to you, then you won't have high excellence in performance. People have to value the work they do, not simply do it and perhaps do it well, but it won't be a source of extraordinary passion, meaning, and performance without discovering that value lives inside me. How are we doing here? Nice question. What else is cooking? Mary Bell, you got another one for me?
Yeah, I think you already answered Edson's question about if care is the foundation of innovation. I think it's kind of the answer you just gave us.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's some question. I'm going to read it in Spanish, Bea, so maybe you can translate it better. Siendo el care la base de la innovación, será el self el principio y la conversación para la acción el activador de la innovación en las relaciones. Es un poco enredada tu pregunta, Edson, pero sí.
Oh, B, I just lost you. Okay. Hey, Maribel, B wants you to repeat the question for her.
Ya, te explico mejor la pregunta. Creo que lo que Edson quiere decir es que si el care es el fundamento de la innovación, el self y la conversación para la acción es lo que nos permite empezar o activar las relaciones que producen la innovación.
Yes, so the conversation for action that's referred to is a particular structure of interaction between two people about action and results. And so this is referring to a particular conversational move, which is important because when you look in the world of conversation, there are a lot of conversations that are not conversations for action. Have you ever gone to meetings and there's a lot of talking and nothing happens? And you leave and say, a lot of talking, nothing happened because no promises were made. No action was committed to. And so when you move from possibility, when you move from care to action, it needs to be some form of a conversation for action. Otherwise, you don't produce action. You just had a nice chat about a possibility. And that's why the move in the innovation conversations of the offer is an action conversation. I'm asking you to say yes or no to a possibility. And either way, you're creating a new future with me, whether you say yes or you say no. But I have created that moment where that future is going to get created by the act of an offer. And so this is how you make an appearance in the world with a possible new future, not just to talk about it, but to make an offer about it. Let's do something. My favorite cartoon, I think, of all time is a picture of two vultures sitting on the branch of a dead tree in the desert. And one of them looks at the other one and says, "Wait, hell, I'm going to go kill something." And I think that's the spirit of leadership. Let's do something. Let's make something happen. Another question.
Gabriela te pregunta, porque dice, todos ahora están hablando de la innovación como una obligación, como un must. Años atrás no era un tema así y hoy en día se ha puesto mucha relevancia en ese tema. ¿Cuál es tu opinión al respecto?
Because innovation is always about creating a new future. It's always about creating new value. If you don't create new value, what's the point? Nothing's, who would accept a promise that's not valuable? And so the fact that it's gotten popular, I think, has become a side effect of the technology around the internet and media, that it's a lot easier now to invent an app and put it out into the world than it used to be to build a new product. And so there's more new stuff flowing around all the time. And a lot of admiration is made to people who are inventing in the new world of the virtual world. And so innovation in some industries is a requirement. You're not going to survive without it. The kind of innovation that we're interested and have been focused on in the Institute is not new apps. It's new human beings. It's new eyes to see the world, new bodies that can act in new conversations, that enable the creation of value, the reduction of waste, creating healthy organizations, relieving pain, and enabling people to have work be a part of designing a good life rather than sacrifice. And these are not going to go away with new apps. These are the deep innovations that are needed. They take time. That's the real deal. And so when you look at innovation as a new offer, the value of an offer always includes the comparison to other offers. You never just have an offer, yes or no. They always, when you make an offer to someone, they say, well, I could accept your offer, I'd decline the offer, I could take someone else's offer. And the biggest competitor for your offer is doing nothing. People will listen and say, no, I'm going to do nothing. I would rather have the future doing nothing than to accept your offer. And so when you see that your offer, your promise, is a promise to change the future for people, its value is that it's a future they want. It's a future they're willing to commit to. And so, because your offer and its value are based on comparison, you need to look in what category are you making your offer? What are the other offers being made out there that you're being compared to? And how do you talk about your comparison? And in our domain of leadership and coaching, I don't believe that true value comes from novelty. I'm not talking about innovation as novelty, of just being new to be new. True value comes from truly enabling people to create new futures, really, with others, that has different results. And that's what leadership is about. That's what coaching is about. That's what consulting is about. And so even though there may be some new innovations in those fields, the fundamental change is not going to change. Human beings have to change in the body, in the mind, in the emotion, in the spirit. And that's not going to change. And so we want to build our offers in these fields based on these deep personal understandings, connections, and competence with helping people deal with their humanity, their history, and creating the future is not external from me. I need to change me to change the future. And how am I going to be accompanied in that journey to become the best me, to create the better future? So your question is, does innovation have value just to innovate? No. It has value because it takes care of something that is cared about. And when you make an offer that's not an innovation to you, that you've done for, in my case, 40 years, but the process is still innovation because you're bringing it to people who've never seen it before, and it's changing their world. And that's why learning the skill of innovation is so important. It's not about coming up with the new product, but helping people adopt to the new practices that will change their life, which is the essence of leadership, coaching, and consulting. How are we doing?
Good. Bob, me encanta esa última parte de nuestra conversación. Cuando yo le pedí a Bob que hiciéramos esta conferencia, fue precisamente por eso, porque muchas veces como consultores desde el instituto vamos a las organizaciones y nos damos cuenta que la gente lo que quiere son novedades, lo que quiere es inventar, y sobre eso está midiendo a sus equipos. Pero realmente inventar es solamente las dos primeras prácticas. La innovación resulta en, como dice Bob claramente, en la adopción de eso que estamos inventando. Si eso que nosotros hemos inventado no se está adoptando a lo que la gente necesita, a lo que importa, a lo que nos está permitiendo hacer transiciones o hacer transformaciones como grupos humanos, realmente lo que estamos creando es desperdicio. Y he visto muchas organizaciones que tienen departamentos hechos para hacer desperdicio. Alguna vez trabajé con un equipo de innovación y desarrollo de una multinacional colombiana de mucho renombre, y el equipo de investigación y desarrollo estaba muy cansado porque les pedían que hicieran 20 productos, pero de esos 20 productos solamente 1 o 2 terminaban siendo exitosos en el mercado. Y ellos ya se sentían como que lo hemos inventado todo. Pero El problema era que solamente veían precisamente las dos primeras partes de todo el proceso de innovación. Entonces, esta era para mí la intención más importante de que Bob nos hablara sobre esto. O sea, la novedad y la invención no tienen ningún sentido si realmente no se está haciendo un proceso adaptativo que le permita a los seres humanos cuidar de lo que nos importa cuidar como equipos y nos importa cuidar como organizaciones. Bob, hemos llegado al final de nuestro tiempo y sé que nos quedaríamos aquí hablando de innovación y de invención y les prometo volvérselos a traer para que podamos ir un poco más profundo en el tema de la innovación y sus 8 prácticas. Les recomiendo el libro es espectacular. Como dice él, desafortunadamente solamente está en inglés, pero lo más importante para nosotros es que no nos miremos como productores de cosas nuevas, sino que nos veamos como seres humanos que estamos desarrollando un mundo en el que todos podamos prosperar. Bob, como siempre, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros y por estos espacios de conversaciones, de claridad y de traernos distinciones donde nuestras organizaciones puedan seguir convirtiéndose en organizaciones para el futuro nuestro y para el futuro de nuestras nuevas generaciones. A todos ustedes, muchas gracias. Los invito a una conversación la próxima semana conmigo acerca de cómo las heridas fundamentales de los seres humanos influyen en nuestro estilo de liderazgo. Entonces, espero que me acompañen dentro de 8 días. Nuevamente, muchas gracias y bueno, y nos vemos y nos seguimos viendo por aquí todos los miércoles. Bob, gracias.
Thank you. Bye-bye.